much. I'm definitely not going to need to introduce myself again. I think that does a good job covering it. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through just an introduction on what Agile is all about. We are then going to take a look at what we call the Waves of Agile. The Waves of Agile is the different layers we just talked about there. The first wave is kind of team, Scrum, Kanban. Some of you might have heard of before. Then we're going to talk about Enterprise Agile, Agile Scaling, Business and Organization Agility, Wave 3, and Digital Innovation, which we really call Wave 4. So we're going to take a real journey through it, and I found out that I have like 3 times as much time as I thought I had, so we're really going to go deeply into it, right? So you'll get a chance to go through all this stuff, and a little bit interactive stuff as well, and discussion. And then we'll talk about how it connects with DevOps, so round it out, and finish up, okay? So let's go in here. You've already learned about my background. The only thing I'll add is I did a computer science undergraduate, so that was my background, and I was MBA from UCLA, as well as I hold a law degree, even though I don't practice law. So that's my educational background. I think everything else is pretty much covered, so I'll just keep going here. Okay? I am a certified trainer for IC Agile and Scaled Agile as well. All right, so the first wave of Agile, which really in the US was probably, I would say, anywhere from maybe around 2001, which is the Agile Manifesto, for those of you who might know about that, right, up until I'd say probably about 5 years ago or so. The first wave of Agile for the most part is passed, even in Asia for the most part. Most organizations have already heard of Scrum. It's not new, it's not something that like, oh, we don't know what that is. I'm sure, just by a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of Scrum? Okay, so this is not something that is unheard of, right? This is not really brand new news. It is an essential foundation, but it's not like this is the first time anybody's heard of it. Wave 2 is what we call Agile Scaling. So what's happened is a lot of organizations like, hey, we need to take this past having 1 or 2 Scrum teams, like 5, 10, 15 people using Scrum. How do we make this impact our whole organization? And that's what Agile Scaling is about. We're talking about 200, 500, 1,000 people using Agile across an organization. A little more challenging. That's really where we are now. This is a really big trend. We'll talk about Scaled Agile. I trained and certified on this. We offer those classes. Actually, we offer our first one in Manila last a month ago. Was it awesome? And we'll have a couple more coming up here shortly. And this is, there's a lot of scaling methods as well. We'll talk about some of those. Okay. Wave 3 is what we call Organization and Business Agility. Okay. Now, Organization and Business Agility is very new, both in the US and here. There's a State of Business Agility report, talks about this. They said most companies are less than 3 years in any business and organization. So that's marketing and finance using Agile and legal and all these other departments outside of tech, right? So now they're taking what was used in tech pretty effectively and they're starting to use it everywhere. And that's what Wave 3 is. That's organization agility, okay? Wave 4 we call digital innovation. The idea here is that every area, every organization is trying to adapt to what's happening. I walked around, saw a lot of cool stuff happening here in Manila, right, in the Philippines. So there's AI, and there's chatbots, there's all kinds of different technologies going on. And really we're responding, how do you keep up with what's happening? You have to have this agility at all levels in order to be able to respond to it, right? And then we have DevOps, and DevOps really, where's my laser? Not that one, there. DevOps goes all the way up and down the entire stack there. So DevOps is really through and through. We're going to look at that toward the end. Okay? But the point is, Agile is not just one thing. Just because you've heard of Scrum, you've heard of DevOps, there's a few other areas, and we're going to try to look at what that means. Okay? So, focus of our Agile practice, by the way, is on the second and third waves, which is scaling Agile and organizational agility. Okay? So let's go into Wave 1, team level Agile. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the Agile Manifesto before? About a half of the room, okay? So this is the foundation of Agile, okay? The Agile Manifesto is really where Agile started, at least in terms of software and technology, okay? So it's individuals' interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Let me give you some examples of what that means, okay? So if we look at the idea of working software over comprehensive documentation, some of you might go, you know what, that is just like common sense, man. Everybody knows that. Everybody does not know that. Surprise. Okay, I've been doing this for over 2 decades now. I started in a big firm. I've worked with pretty much every big company you can think of, Fortune 500, Global 1000, startups. And so many companies think that success is that they wrote some documentation. and the documentation is thick, or it's a big PDF file now, or whatever it is, and maybe it's got that's what they think is success. So working software is definitely not the standard that a lot of people use, even to this day. So even though it seems like common sense, this is actually was pretty ground shaking. You're like, whoa, this is different, right? Working software. And then customer collaboration over contract negotiations. I told you I am trained as a lawyer. Trust me, I'm a lawyer. That's an oxymoron, I think. But at any rate, right? So customer collaboration over contract negotiation. I'm based in Singapore, although we have offices here in Manila as well, and we operate throughout ASEAN. And I was doing a engagement with a company that was in Indonesia. In Indonesia, you must have a local partner in order to do business there. And so we spent probably 4 months working up a contract to be able to get that business going. But in the meantime, while we were negotiating our contract, I was going back and forth, my headquarters in the US, working the contract, we lost the business. You know why we lost that business? Was it?
Too much politics.
Too much politics? Sort of. We were just too slow, right? We spent all our time doing a contract, and there were people in Indonesia who were actually ready to deliver. We were doing training and coaching, and they were already doing it. They're like, hey, let's just go ahead and do it. So instead of us spending all that time on some contract, they just got it done, right? So this is what they're saying here, basically, and I can tell you this myself. The only people who really end up winning when you do a lot of contract negotiations are lawyers, okay? Everybody else, you don't know so well, and that's what happened to us. Okay, so in responding to changeover following a plan. So I'll give a story of the D-Day invasion. How many of you guys have heard of the D-Day invasion of Europe in World War II? Not so many. Wow, it's not. I guess not commonly known history now. Okay, so anyway, the Allies, which is Britain and France, etc., and America, were going to fight Hitler, and they were trying to get onto continental Europe because they basically were off the continent altogether, except for England. Okay, and so they were going to fight, but when they were going to attack and get back into France, to get back on the mainland of Europe, it turned out that the Germans already knew their plan, right? So they had these spies and, counterintelligence and listening to radio chatter and all this, and they knew their plan. So they had two choices at that point. One, they could go, you know what? We're still going to hit the same beach. We're still going to attack at the same place. Now, what do you think would have happened to them? They would have been slaughtered, right? They would have been waiting with them, machine gun would be over. Or they could do what they did, which is they did for the Enigma machine, counterintelligence, cracking, spy, turning spy, right? They even did like whole blow-up columns of tanks, right? Where from the air it looked like you had a whole column of tanks going, and it actually was not. They were all fake. So what they did is they did a lot of adaptation and adapting into their plan to trick the Germans. And ultimately they prevailed, which was good. But if they had done it the traditional way, which is just follow the plan, right? A lot of you are measured today by just following that plan. Did you follow the plan well enough, right? No matter if that plan is leading you up a cliff, all we want to know is that you followed your plan, right? So what they're saying here is, you know what? Stop just following the plan, actually respond to change. There's another story that I'll tell, which is I have an hour. So I tell more stories. I'm dangerous to you, but at any rate, there's a company called Iridium. Has anybody ever heard of Iridium? You have? What does Iridium do? Was it? One more time. You're looking it up. Oh, okay, that's cheating. I can't look it up. All right, so Iridium used to make these satellite phones. The satellite phones were, this is close. They were about as big as this thing, okay? Bigger. Okay, so satellite phones were huge. And they used to cost a few $1,000s, and they were, of course, hooked up to satellites because they were satellite phones, right? Now, Iridium was making these phones, it was back in the 90s, and they had the perfect plan. They followed their plan to execution, launched their satellites, they had the whole thing up, and yet they went bankrupt. Now, according to traditional thinking, a company that follows a plan that well should get a project management award, and they should be like the best company ever, right? But they were bankrupt. Why was Iridium bankrupt? They did not adapt to change. What change do you think it was they didn't adapt to?
Disruptive change.
Technology, yes. Any guess what technology? The cell phone. So when you had the cell phone, which is small and cute, it wasn't smartphones back then, but it was still small, a couple $100s, right? You could get them. Or you could get this for like a few $1,000s. which one are you going to buy?
Smaller plans.
Right? And that's what everybody did. So because everybody did not adapt to the change in the market, they went out of business. Now, what they could have done is they could have said, you know what? We are only going to, put up enough satellites to cover like the marine, maritime, sailing, like out, if you're out in the wild areas, cover that. Instead, but they didn't do that. They just said, we're going to keep on sticking with our plan, and they're out of business, which is why most of you have to look it up, because we don't know who they are, because they're gone, right? Which is fair. So adapting and to change is very important. I'm going to tell you something else, by the way, about the Agile Manifesto. This is where this really got applied to software, and this did come from the U.S., and some practitioners in Europe and the U.S. They've been in Utah. However, the foundations of Agile came from Lean, okay? Do you know where Lean came from? Anybody know where Lean came from? Manufacturing in what country? Japan, that's right. So actually, this stuff all came from Japan, came from Asia, actually. The foundations of all of Agile, which really freaked out some of my American colleagues who were like, what? What do you mean? It didn't come from America, right? But it didn't. That's the truth, though. It actually came from Asia originally. So I note that because I've been here in 6 years in Asia now. And a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh yeah, it's just from America. I'm from California, so okay, but it's not. It actually came from Asia. Interesting. Okay, so popular Agile methods: Scrum, Kanban, DevOps, XP, right? So this is single team level Agile. So what we're talking about here is we have our Scrum, right? Everybody knows Scrum almost in this room. This is very popular for software development. We've got our Kanban, which is often used now for software, used for manufacturing too, but it gets used in a lot of different areas. You can use it, you got sales, you got whatever, you guys track all this stuff in Kanban. Okay? And then we got our DevOps, right? So bringing development and operations and DevSecOps, which is getting very popular now, bringing all that stuff close together, right? So that's yet another method that's founded on Agile and lean flow principles. And then you also have Scrum Xp, right? So XP is the engineering practices. We'll talk about it a little more, but the Agile engineering practices are from XP. I used to use that a lot when I was developing years ago, and now it's really part of DevOps. But these are all team-level Agile methods. And I say that because we're talking about 5, 10 people maybe on a team. We have what we call the 2 pizza box rule, which is to say if it takes more than you can't feed your team with 2 pizza boxes, 2 large pizzas, then it's too big. You gotta have another team. Okay? So this is small size teams. Let's go to Enterprise Agile Scaling. This is wave 2 of Agile. Okay, so this is Scaled Agile Framework. This is something I certify, our practice, our team certifies on. My colleague Austin over here, she does as well. We ran a class here, was it last month, I think? Last month, month before last?
September. Yeah.
Time flies. So we ran a class recently on this. We're going to be running a few more coming up. But the difference here is that instead of Scrum, which is just this bottom part down here, right, single teams kind of thing, what Scaled Agile does is it takes us across 50 people, 125 people, 500 people. We can have multiple of these trained. So it says, how do I bring this up to a large organization that's building maybe complicated stuff? Maybe they're building airplanes. Maybe they're building satellites. Maybe they're building, whatever it is, very complex software. And so Scaled Agile takes us up. How do we do that? How do we get our budgets going? How do we make sure our product management is in alignment across all those teams? Do we have product vision? What about architecture, right? All that stuff really isn't there so much in Scrum because you don't need that much complex stuff when there's only 7 of you working together. I can go talk to you, and we're good, right? But that doesn't happen when it gets this big. So here we learn more about how do we bring this up to a larger scale. This is actually the most popular of the scaling methods. Probably about 30% report using this now after Scrum and Scrums. Scrum and Scrums, by the way, is not really, in my opinion, a scaling method in enterprise scale because it's only for 3 to 5 teams. So it's not really enough if you're really going to go very far with scaling up in terms of agility. Okay. This next one is the Spotify method. By show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of the Spotify method before? 2, 3, okay, obviously not a lot of consultants in this room. Consultants love the Spotify method. Okay, the first thing people walk in the door, they're like, hey, Spotify method. Okay, this is like the method of, for organization agility. It was actually used by Spotify, obviously, and then ING Netherlands and others. But the idea is you got these squads. Anyway, how many people heard of squads, tribes, and guilds? How many people have heard of that? Okay, still almost nobody. All right, so at any rate, this method is very popular with a lot of folks because now, again, it's not meant to be a commercial agile approach, though, for scaling, right? This is meant for the Spotify company. So I talked to many of you probably earlier today. You have your own company, you have your own startup, and if you said, you know what, we want to come up with our own Agile method, you would have come up with something like this for your organization potentially as it grows. So Spotify came up with it for their company. They did not come up with it to sell it, right? So this is not a commercial Agile framework, although lots of consultancies sell this approach. All right. So Walt Disney World, this is an older version of my slides, but it's not bad. I like this description actually. So this is one of the biggest projects I ever worked on, or programs, what we're gonna call it. We had 500 plus people for Walt Disney World in Orlando, over 3 continents, and over $1 billion program. And we basically relaunched all of Walt Disney World and all their online experience, e-commerce, selling, you get your hotel room, you get RFID stuff there. Really cool, really cool. The Mickey bands, or whatever we call them now, magic bands. It's been a while. At any rate, so we use Agile across all of this, using a similar approach to Scaled Agile. It wasn't Scaled Agile, but it was very similar, because a lot of the approaches are very similar when you use large scale across a lot of people. You have like 50 Agile teams, and I used to lead the creative. I was a Scrum Master and the program leader for the creative, so the user experience and creative. You have Mickey come walking in, all the pictures of princesses, we had all that, right? Very complex, all working together. Interesting note here again, because I like to juxtapose what's happening in America and what's happening in Asia. So a few years after we did this was about 2011, I think, and after we did this, I was over here in Asia, and we were doing Shanghai, well, I wasn't on that one, but Shanghai Disney, and I thought they would use all the same technology that we were using at Shanghai Disney, but they didn't, which surprised me. Do you know why they didn't? Data privacy. It was all Disney. And nobody's worried about patents anyway, but nonetheless. Any other idea why they didn't use our tech? What was it? I heard somebody say something. Culture. Actually, it was the fact, which was very interesting again, this really freaked out again a lot of my American colleagues, that the tech that we had here was pretty much old school compared to what they had in China. They already had all the wireless payment and all the stuff was already there. So there was no need for this, which was wild. Because I thought, oh yeah, definitely going to use this. I mean, we invested $1 billion to do this. Okay? And yet, the tech that they had in China, there was no need for it, which was pretty interesting. So that's just a side note, just to show kind of the way things are evolving. Okay? Business agility is wave 3. So in wave 3, we see, okay, now we don't want to just apply this stuff in tech. We actually want to apply it to our whole organization, right? We'll be like a Silicon Valley company, like a Google, or like an Amazon, or like whoever it is, Amazon or Netflix, right? So to do that, well, let's the video will tell it. Let's give a try to our video here. Here we go.
Our world is changing quickly. New technology makes possible tomorrow what we can't even imagine today, and people have become accustomed to this rapid pace of change. As a company, this means that you need to adapt continuously to meet shifting customer demands and embrace new possibilities. More and more of our clients contact us primarily online or via their mobile phones. They expect the same experience whether they contact us over the phone, by chat, or in one of our branches. Until 2015, ING worked according to classical structures and hierarchies. It had some advantages, but it doesn't work in an age of fintechs, big data, and hyperconnectivity. Something had to change. With a desire to innovate and meet customer needs and experiences as our starting point, and inspiration from digital innovators like Spotify, Google, and Netflix, ING became the first bank in the world to adopt the Agile way of working. And if you truly embrace the Agile way of working as an organization, you say goodbye to trusted structures. It's a bold move. Your goals change, and so do your ways of managing and organizing. Your values change, and you communicate differently. Agile working is a mindset. You don't act agile, you are agile. You need to trust each other, take responsibility, and make things happen. This creates a happy and involved workforce that shows initiative and is prepared for change. So, how do we achieve this? We work in squads. small autonomous teams with end-to-end responsibility for their own customer-related purpose. Our squads consist of different disciplines: customer journey experts, data analysts, IT developers, and UX designers. The product owner oversees the squad's work and takes responsibility for the output. Agile coaches secure the squad's culture, skills, and way of working to ensure they operate as a high-performing team. Squad members share expertise and develop their craftsmanship within a particular chapter. For example, the data analyses chapter or product management process chapter. The chapter lead secures the personal development of the chapter members and helps define how to get a job done. And how do we achieve cohesion between squads? That's where tribes come in, a set of squads with a related purpose. For example, we have the Service Tribe Daily Banking and a Service Tribe Mortgages. This agile way of working empowers us to adapt readily to changing consumer needs and feedback. It makes us faster and more innovative, and most importantly, it makes us more attractive to customers and employees. What does or does not work is a matter of trial and error. Agile working lives up to its name. Nothing is carved in stone. That's the essence of our way of working at ING. We are already agile in the Netherlands. Now, we're rolling out our new mindset globally.
So what you see here is this is not something that is only in tech at this point. This is something where the whole organization is working this way, right? Servant leadership and empowered people and teams and, very flexible structures around the different kind of teams that are working together. And that's actually that Spotify method I told you again they use in their company, but they apply this across their whole organization. Now I'll tell you, I know a lot of the coaches actually who worked on this and at many conferences, and it took a lot of agile coaching and working. It's not automatic. But I will tell you this, a lot of people are like, oh, you know what? The Agile is easy. Just come on and now we're there. And that's not the case at all. A lot of times people will come in like, oh, you guys are an empowered team. Go and, figure out what you want to do. And everybody sits there and goes, because people are not used to that, right? They're used to somebody coming in telling them, do A, B, C, D, and then do E, right? And no one's telling you that. And now it's a little bit of a transition to go to, hey, I know that, we are empowered to do this. We're actually going to start operating this way. So it's not automatic by any means, but organizationally, they applied this to their entire organization. Oops. All right, there we go. So this is what we call the shift to teal. It comes from a book called Reinventing Organizations, down there, one of my favorites, and it's got by a French guy named Malou. And basically, it talks about different kinds of organizations. And this is, again, about organizational agility, right? And so here you've got red, right? And red is basically power. It's like a street gang, right? So the most powerful person rules, and everybody else had better back down, and that's it, right? That's how it works. Pure power. Second one is what we call amber. You'll see this in governments and military, like in church organizations, where there's a very set hierarchy and division of roles between different people, okay? So this is the kind of the second type of organization we found. Then third kind of the evolution of organizations is orange. I, for most of my career, have worked in or related to an orange organization. These are multinationals, maybe you have as well, right? It's carrot and stick. If you do well, we give you a reward. If you don't do well, get out of here, right? We got meritocracy. You're supposed to do better if you get a better result, etc., right? And you see in here this green guy or gal who's looking like a little confused. That's an Agile coach. Because Agile coaches usually go in to these really, orange kind of, the organization's a machine, and they're supposed to make it more like a family. And believe me, I've been doing this myself for many years. It's a challenge, right? Because a lot of these organizations operate like a machine. And the people in the organizations are cogs of the machine. And therefore, it's very hard to transition it to what we call green. Green is really this idea of the organization like a family, right? So I like to give the example because it's a pretty obvious one for a lot of people. You have kids, okay? If you have a kid, a child, daughter, son, right, and they mess up in school, they don't do so well, they mess up in something else, are you like, hey, you're out of here? No, right? You're like, hey, what can we do? Let's try to help you. Let's figure out, what things we can do, right? And the idea of the green organization is it acts like a family, right? And there's a lot of merit to that, actually. Okay, so this is what you'll see a lot in different organizations. I'll say some in the Valley. I'm not going to say all because not all of them operate that way. But so my niece she did internships with Google, Twitter, and what was the third one? Facebook. And she actually did not like Google at all, which is surprising to me. So I was like, oh, this is the place to be. But it turned out she felt like she was just a number. Google got so big, she felt like she was just like one small, so she actually decided to go to Twitter when she graduated and she went and worked there instead. But the idea is that this green type of organization is where the organization is a family, okay? And then we have kind of the bleeding edge of these organizations we call teal, but that's what Lou calls it, teal. Teal is the idea that an organization is like an organism, right? It's kind of, you're looking for helping people to find maximizing their levels of leadership, their capabilities. You know, it's very fluid. People bring their whole self to work, right? They don't have to hide part of who they are to come to their job. Now, needless to say, this is not the majority of organizations. And two, if I recall, don't want to lie here, but I'm pretty sure almost every teal organization that he found and that he kind of talked about in his book were all privately owned, okay? So when you got some company that's publicly owned, in the stock market, it's almost, I'm not gonna say impossible, but it's almost impossible for this to happen. Do you know why? Was it? Too many owners, but those owners, right, the stock shareholders, they want a return every quarter. They want to see their stock go up. So if you go, you know what, I want to make sure we're treating people right, we're getting people to their maximum, capabilities, so like, is that making me any money? Nope, too bad, right? So it's not really compatible, right? So it's very hard for a public company to be one of these two organizations, okay? Because these really operate more for the benefit of the people in the organization as well as their market and their customers. And really, a pure public company operates more for the benefit of the shareholders. So there's a difference. Okay, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but this is pretty interesting stuff. I always enjoy this, right? Okay, this is the modern Agile. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of modern Agile before? Nobody. Wait, did you raise your hand? Okay. Nobody. All right, so nobody has heard of modern Agile. Okay, so modern Agile, this is the idea, another idea for applying Agile across the organization. I'll hit it really quickly. Make people awesome. I really like this one a lot. This is just the idea that your goal is really to make people be able to really do well and to do great stuff in your organization. We have continuous learning, right? It's very fuzzy. We have our continuous learning, and we also have making a sense of safety. And I'll talk about this one really quickly. These can apply in any organization, any type of organization. So I worked in an organization, right? I was an enterprise Agile coach, and I was there, and we had a new leader come in the tech area, and the new leader basically said, oh, I did a survey. The survey said people don't feel very safe, psychologically safe. They don't feel safe. And she came in a session just like this one, okay? So they're all here, she's with the microphone. And she said, I'd like anybody who doesn't feel safe to raise their hand. And then she looked around like I'm looking at you now, okay? She paced a little bit, check. How many people do you think raised their hand? Would you raise your hand? Why not? Fear, yeah. Because that was what people felt. And then at the end of that, with nobody raising their hand, she said, see, we don't have any problem with safety, psychological safety. It's not a problem. And this is a lady who totally did not get it at all. Okay? She thought, because everybody was in fear of her, that she was going to get creativity and innovation. That's not how it works. Okay? If everybody's afraid of you, the only thing they're going to do is make sure they make not one single mistake. And if they do, they never tell you about it because they know you're going to get rid of them. Okay? So she's like, I want innovation, but she's not going to get the innovation. Why? Because everybody's afraid of her. This is not the way to lead. And let me tell you, these styles of leadership are not easy. Believe me, I've worked on it for years myself. A lot of other people do. It's not easy. That's why Agile coaches is so much work. This takes a lot of learning and relearning and unlearning and constantly, because this is not always natural to us. Okay. But I'll give you an example from Google. So let's give a good example to Google since I gave a tough one for them. Okay. So for Google has basically this Adsense. Anybody heard of Adsense before? Mm-hmm. There you go. All right, technology. So Adsense is where they make all their money. It actually came from what they call a 20% time innovation project, basically where everybody's given an opportunity to go out and try different ideas. And basically it's what targets and knows exactly what you want, and they pay big money for you to obviously target and advertise. Okay? So one new engineer came in, true story as far as I know, it's listed in several places, I think, including InfoQ. And the engineer came in and wrote that code. Now this is the golden goose. This makes millions of dollars probably every hour or every few minutes for Google, okay? They're making tons of money with AdSense. Broken. What do you think happened to that engineer? Was it? They're out of there, right? Wrong. they had a session, they brought everybody together, said, let's figure out why it was so easy for this code to be broken. Let's figure out, what we can do to prevent that happening when new engineers come on, right? And then they did, and that's obviously going to save us a lot of money that isn't able to easily be broken again. But something else came out of that. So one, they kind of fixed the problem that made it so easy and fragile to break, that Adsense code. But what else do you think came out of that meeting that was even more important? Was it? Safety. People felt a sense of safety. They said, you know what? Even if I mess up, I'm not saying I can, right? I'm still going to have the opportunity to, and so do you think people are going to take more risk there or in the other organization I described? Okay? So this is really important. People can talk all day about we're innovative, we want innovation, but if you don't live this stuff, not much chance. Okay? This is actually really important.